the next question.
Good evening, keepers of the cash. Gary B, the casual comic guy here, and we have a full show tonight, guys. We are kicking off the new year with a bang, but before we get to our incredible guest tonight, we have to introduce our panel. First off, we'll introduce Mr. Chuck Hensey. He was first in. Chuck, great to have you on, sir.
Nice to be on. Happy New Year, everyone.
Then, of course, my Thursday stand right there, Digger Jim. How you doing, Jim?
Doing good. Been off for 2 weeks, and I don't want to go back to work.
And the birthday boy himself, turning to Big 4-0, Cliff on Comics. Happy birthday, Cliff.
I'm turning the 4-0 once again, and I love it. Thank you.
He's only got about 10 more 40s left in him, guys, and then he's got to kick it up a year. So
four more 40s left, 3 more 40s left. I don't know.
And of course, a guy I met through YouTube, one of my favorite people to have a conversation with, and nobody reads a book live better than him. I love his channel. If you guys haven't checked him out, his channel link is in the description below. He's been on the show a few times, but he's never been on the 1011. I am very happy to welcome and kick off this new year, because how can you start the new year classier than having Gore Vidal on as your guest? Gore, how you doing tonight, sir?
Good day, Gary. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here, and thank you very much for having me here for your first guest for the new year, Gary. It's quite the honor and the pleasure, and I like talking comics with you, and it's just enchanting. It really is, and I'm glad that I'm here.
And you guys should know that Gore bullies me through text messages sometimes with Marion stuff.
That is a lie. I don't know why he thinks that. I do not know why he thinks that.
Right? My fire finger's itchy right now.
I do not know why he thinks that.
Listen, I'll tell you what. I'm like, this man has sent me into an existential spiral on more than one occasion. So forget you being bullied. I'm over here pondering the importance of life, or if it's just an illusion anyway, so it doesn't matter. And then I go to work and convince people that they too should be working and not thinking about suicidal ideation.
Oh, Lord.
Now, Gore, before we say hi to the chat, give the quick 2 minutes of who you are, what your channel's about, and just let people get to know you a little bit.
Well, sure. I mean, I've been on YouTube for about over 10 years. And like some of us here probably started our channel is I was among people who didn't read comics, at least not the comics that I like to read. And so I decided to watch some comic book tubers, and I was commenting on their channels. And so they encouraged me to start my own channel. And I've been making videos talking about books that I like. So I don't make a negative video. I'm not opposed to them, but I just pick comics that I want to talk about, why I like about them. And sometimes I read parts of the stories. I just show them. And because I find the medium, as Gary knows, is equal to books and films in quality. And I think they have the same kind of artistic value, even though many of my literary friends don't think that, no matter what I say to them.
And it's funny too, right? Because there's been studies that show that young children who start out reading comics have a better vocabulary than people who don't.
That I didn't know. I didn't know.
I'm almost sure that's out there.
And they just don't see it as a respectable medium. That's just, frankly, that's...
I know. It's funny, right? Because people respect art, people respect literature, but you put them together and they're somehow taboo.
No, they are. I remember in the 60s with Lichtenstein, he would do those, basically something out of a comic. But he does that, and those are worth millions of dollars. That gets respected. But if you show a Starlin drawing from Captain Marvel or Warlock, as remarkable as those are, and you tell them, well, it's not Lichtenstein, it's a guy named Starlin, it's a comic, they dismiss it. Yeah. In any event,
they gloss over. Yeah,
They do.
All right,
So
let's.
yeah. So anyway, that's what I've been doing videos over the years, talking about comics that I like and meeting interesting people over the years, as with Gary and others I've met personally on YouTube, and it's been a wonderful experience. Absolutely
Nice.
rewarding.
Nice. Yeah, I feel the same. All right, let's say hi to our audience that's here so far tonight. First in this evening, Jerry the Jitterbug, one of his all-time favorite people. Jerry's just a guy.
Jerry beat Las Cruces.
Yeah,
Oh,
he said sorry,
God.
Then
Wow.
how you doing today, sir? Great to see you as always. We appreciate your support at all times. We have Brad. Good evening, Brad. Robert in this evening. Good evening, Robert. Great to see you, sir. We, of course, have our co-host Chuck right there. And we have another one of my favorite people here, Joe from Anachronic Comics, whose birthday is on January 5th. So happy early birthday, Joe.
You know what's
And
funny?
tune in to
Joe's
Joe's
birthday.
stream Friday night. Was that where you were going to, Cliff?
Yeah, of course. I have every intention of joining him because the inverse of his birthday is his birth year. No, his age this year is the inverse of my age this year.
That
Oh,
doesn't
so-
sound right at all.
So,
So
Joe's,
I'm hoping-
Joe's 21 and Cliff is 12.
Yeah,
Exactly. But you know what I'm looking forward to? I hope Joe lives forever because I really want to do a stream where Joe is 96 and I'm 69, and we'll call it Cliff on Comics Lemon Party Birthday. It'll be great.
And this is why we were late tonight, guys. Cliff was having a diva moment.
Yup.
I needed a beverage in my Cliff on Comics mug, available from the Cliff on Comics Teespring store.
B.
I
Jackson
need
Roy
a
Kirk, good evening, sir. John's Comics with Kids, great to see you, buddy.
John,
Gore lose one.
wasn't he right there?
Did, Gore win a bet? Did Gary win a bet with the devil, or did Gore lose one?
Why can't it be a little bit of both, John?
Yeah, John's one of the the treasures of beating people on this channel.
We got Jackson Roy Kirk lying already with his New Year's resolution.
No more trolling.
One day I would love to have the Jackson Roy Kirk on.
Yeah.
He could just do the CJ. He doesn't want to show his face, but he could just do the CJ and just show his hands in the books.
There you go.
Right? Phil's Treehouse, good evening, sir. Great to see you. The one and only brother John. How you doing, John? Great to see you. Zach's Collections. Zach, you got to message me. I need to know if you're available to co-host next Tuesday with Callie and Jordan Squad on. All right, and then we have filling up. We have Ruby G, White Tiger, Cool Con Collected. Mark from Legion of Comics. Good evening, sir. Great to see you. And Tony from the Comiverse. Good evening, Tony. Mr. Kenneth Bird. Good evening, Kenneth. Happy New Year to you all. And I think we are caught up for now. So Gore, this show's about you, man. We're going to turn it over to you, let you start out with your first book, and let you just take the stage, sir.
Okay. Again, thank you for having me, Gary, and thank you for all of you for being here. Like I told Gary earlier, this was tough to do, and these are not in the order of like my favorites, but they are important comics, and I think most of them, but I don't think all of them, were comics that I read when I was very, very young. To preface it, I was reading an article from the Comics Journal from 1981, I think, in 1980 or 81. And they had done a study of the average reader of comics back then, 1980. And the average age was 12 years old.
Yes.
And so the writers, if you mind, most of the writers were aiming at that market. But as we all know here, we're all comic book people, is that some writers were writing for mature audiences. But what I mean by that, they were writing for kids as well who could basically read above or think above their own age, which and I think everyone here is probably like that. And so keep that in mind, that many of these comics that I read were between ages 9 and 14. And then they basically shaped the type of comics that I would read in the future. Now, the first one I'm going to take down this here. is the first one. It's one of the earliest comics that I read. This is not the issue, but this is Fantomas.
Oh, yeah. You and I have talked about this quite a bit.
Fantomas is a Mexican comic that began in the 1960s, continued through the 90s. There are over 600 issues of this comic. Wow. It was published weekly, and this size and in smaller sizes. Fantomas is a variation of French pulp fiction of Fantomas, Diabolic, The Phantom, Mandrake the Magician, a comic called The Killing. And what Fantomas is, even though it's a Mexican comic, what's interesting about it is that he lives in Paris. He has all his assistants are women, named after the Zodiac.
Oh.
His origins are mysterious. There's different origins for him. He never takes off his mask. Some of the major storylines include one where Hitler had a son, and he's being raised in Latin America, and so the comic takes place in the early 80s, and he's fomenting a nationalistic, xenophobic, fascist ideology through Europe, the United States, and Latin America. And Fantomas is the one that's going to put a stop to him. He's got another storyline where someone is burning all the major books of literature, like the Gutenberg Bible, or at least Cervantes, you name it. They're being destroyed. And Cervantes' friends, though, and they appear in the comic. It's something that was just very unusual. You wouldn't see that in an American comic. Real-life writers. Octavio Paz from Mexico appears. Susan Sontag appears. Norman Mailer appears. Alberto Moravia, a writer from Italy. His girlfriends. I'm not joking. These women appear in the comics. Linda Carter in the early 80s.
Nice.
He's on a boat with her in a bikini, and it's clear they've made love. Carla Cardinale.
What issue is that? Hold on. What issue is that? I need to write that down.
No, those are. I don't have it here handy, but it's in one of the issues. Bo Derek with Jane Fonda. He's showing her a film by Luis Buñuel, The Exterminating Angel. And the one I've been trying to find, but it's very difficult to find, is one of the Charlie's Angels. Oh, yes, Farrah Fawcett is another one. That one I have. Yeah. Farrah Fawcett he dated. It's Jacqueline Smith. That's the one I've been looking for. So he's an intellectual. The types of stories the type of crimes he goes after are rather unusual. To get into his state, you have to have a code word, which is a line from a literary work. It could be a work from Plutarch's Lives. It could be from Borges. It could be from a contemporary novelist. And the comic would always cite it at the bottom to tell you what it was from. Because the writers always wanted to make clear, because the majority of us who read comics, because my family came from Mexico, and comics were very popular there. But most of them are working class, poor kids. But this comic wanted to introduce a lot of culture into the comic. And one of the tragedies of this is that even though over 600 issues have been published, it's never been translated into English. There are no omnis or trades of the originals. There's complicated reasons why that's the case. And it's just a very unusual comic. I mean, it's just fantastic.
Right. And you either have them or you don't, huh?
You don't, right? And it would be like Bruce Wayne, for example, being a notable. Imagine Bruce Wayne in the 70s and 80s dating all these actresses, and they would appear in the comic. He's a playboy, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And being a literary friend with people from all over the world. His friend in Fantomas, Picasso, appears in it. Dali is a friend of his, Salvador Dali. I mean, he's a very cultured man. But he's got one thing, though. He likes to steal expensive things. That's what makes him part of. That's why the police are always after him. He saves the world all the time, but he likes, for example, in the Louvre, is the Mona Lisa, but he has the original Mona Lisa. And he did a story, and I'll stop with this one, is where he goes back in time to meet Sigmund Freud to help him understand why he does this. And Freud asked him about his mother and his father. He goes, my father's memory, my memory of my father, he was in prison, but I don't remember his face. My mother, I do remember. Very beautiful woman, and I always miss her. And Freud decides the reason you're stealing all these beautiful things is you're trying to retrieve your mother, which is impossible. Now, all this time, this Freud is dying in London from cancer. He thinks he's dreaming this. All this is in one comic. And again, it's a very unusual comic, but it's something when I was a kid, I was thinking, what is this? And it just fascinated me.
Right. Wow. Now, we did have a quick question from the crowd.
Sure.
For you. Where is it?
Put it back here.
Trying to find. I'm sorry.
Phil's.
Yeah, Phil's Treehouse asked if you were familiar with anything from the obscure cities.
Oh yes, that's the Peter's. That's the Shaitan and Peter stories, like The Leaning Girl and those books. Like I said, this was tough to choose. I have those books here, and those are extraordinary works. Extraordinary. I was introduced to those books thanks to Earl Grey, a fellow YouTuber. And Earl Grey has a massive library of European things, and he's from Germany. And I'm going to reference later because he's a fan of a comic that I also admire, which I'm going to talk about. Monica
Bellucci is not a bad choice.
You know,
if Sophie Marceau too.
He would have dated all of them. if the comic was, yeah. So the 90s comics I don't have, but if Fantomas, he would have been involved with every single one of them. Oh yes, but he doesn't date the women that are his assistants, named after the Zodiac. They're in love with him, but he won't date them. He's got a strong code.
Strong code.
Sure.
You wait me, girl.
But he will date other men's wives. That's a fact. That's a fact.
Okay. His code is all over the place. I love that the back of issue 142, you could purchase el número uno de Vicente Fernández y lo mejor de Roberto Carlos for only $149 for 3 compact discs featuring all the #1 hits of Vincent Fernandez and the best of Roberto Carlos. I love that. Love
it. Chente. Vicente Fernandez is Chente, who died not too long ago. A great Mexican singer. One of my favorites of my mother. And I like him as well.
Well, great first book.
Okay.
And I always love hearing you talk about Fantomas because every time that we've talked about it, I can just tell what influence it had on you.
Again, the idea. This is one of the few Mexican comics, and that's issue #1. I acquired that years ago. Very hard to find. The comics are very difficult to find. Okay, my second one. I think Gary and I think the panel will like this one. So when we moved to the U.S., which would have been in the 70s, and I didn't know any English. That's why I have an accent. And I would go to the convenience stores. There was no comic shop where I lived. If you've seen the film Lone Star, John Sayles film with Chris Christopher and McConaughey, it's pretty much small Texas town I lived in. But the convenience stores, we all know this, had everything.
Right.
Savage Sword of Conan, the Warren magazines, tons of film magazines, even comic magazines, would appear there. And I would the art. It was the art that always drew me. The art drew me to a book.
And I miss those days when you go into a convenience store and they just had shelves of magazines in there. It was amazing.
It was amazing, and we had very little money, and so it was always tough to pick. It really was. This, I think, is the first issue that I picked up, and this is the original copy. And this little guy opened up a lot of the world for me. This was Epic Magazine.
Ooh, yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, you guys would know this issue.
Mm-hmm.
This is from 1982. Now, again, the names I'm about to name, I didn't know who they were. But this issue, just to give you an idea of what I was introduced to. Again, mind you, first you have Carl Potts drawing something called Last of the Dragons. I have no context about this. I mean, I do know English by this point. I can read it. But I had no context of what this was. I turn the page, and what do I see? This. Someone named John Bolton drawing this.
I love John Bolton's work.
Drawing this.
John Bolton's so good.
This remarkable work. Now, granted, as a kid, I'm thinking, can I buy this? And yes, kids can buy this.
I was like, how old were you? How old were you? Like 12?
I was basically, for this one, probably 11.
11.
This how can I hide it once I buy it?
Yeah, that's a nudie magazine back then.
Right, and I'm going to get into that. How that.
You see, my parents didn't care. They were just happy I was reading. If I walked out with that and they thumbed through it, they'd be like, "All right, enjoy your book."
So and then I was
a
introduced to
liberal.
Bolton, right? And I turned the page, and who else is in here? But this is before I knew his work on Captain Marvel, before his work on Warlord. It's Dreadstar, Jim Starlin.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
This is my introduction to Starlin. And
That's fantastic.
these comics definitely went over my head, but it didn't matter to me. And then you get this story here, my introduction to Rick Beach. This is like a science fiction Moby Dick story.
Crazy.
Something absolutely extraordinary. I did not have the previous issue to this. I don't think so. I think this is the first one that I bought. So again, this is an Epic is an anthology. I was completely lost, but I was completely enchanted by this. And I would continue to buy Epic for years, but it wasn't over.
And very mature storytelling. Like the stories were so good.
And then I turned the page, and what is this? You know,
What
That's
is
right
it?
there. I get in trouble for.
Is that a Boris Vallejo?
bingo. This one had Boris Vallejo, an article on him and his work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got in trouble for sure.
No, this made. I was going to Catholic school at the time, so this made confession very interesting. As you guys know, you lie to the priest the way it works. You lie to the priest, you're lying to God because God can read you, but he knows everything, right? So I had to tell him what I was buying. And then, boom, Corbin.
Right.
This one issue had all these people in there. And I had already seen Corbin's work, and because let's get into our third one. Because at the same time that this came out, I discovered this guy.
And what a lot of people don't know is like a lot of those magazines, artists that are super popular, like Neil Adams, writers like Chris Claremont, they're all cutting their teeth in those magazines.
Mm-hmm.
So you already saw what I was introduced to, and it was, and this is before I knew some of the work they did before then. And the book I'm going to show now is tied in with a magazine. I think some of you know what magazine it is. However, in that magazine, there was always a picture of this comic that I'm about to show you that I always wanted. I saw it as a kid, teenager, years passed. I stopped reading comics. And then when I got back into comics, I looked for a copy. But I saw this, and I always wanted it. And I finally got it.
Is it Heavy Metal?
It's from Heavy Metal, though. It's print here.
Oh, the art and Morbius.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Very
This
good.
is very hard to find. It's usually very expensive. I found it years ago. A beautiful copy. This picture here of this woman, absolutely striking. But I remember this when I was a kid. I would see it in the advertisements, and I couldn't order it. There's no way I could order this. Not because my parents objected to this, but we didn't have the money for stuff like this. And back then it was still cheap, but we couldn't be ordering stuff like this. But what led me to Mobius was about a year before Epic, I discovered at that same convenience store this issue, which is all beat up. It's Heavy Metal, 1981.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now you're thinking, this is adult. This was behind the counter with the Playboys and the Hustlers and all those. These ended up with the Epics and all the other stuff before I was buying like Famous Monsters and Eerie and stuff like that. And then I saw this. And I wasn't sure if they were going to sell it to me. And they did. And obviously I liked it because it has, frankly, naked women in it. And now the film Heavy Metal had just showed on HBO.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember when HBO would be free on the weekends, like every 6 months or something?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would watch everything they played. Everything. So one night they were showing Heavy Metal, right? And, was introduced to, without knowing, now this is Bloodstar, but Corbin's in here. Right. So I'm thinking, I've seen this before. Although I thought it was Den, but it wasn't Den. So Corbin is in here. And then there's another artist named Enki Bilal, who's from Eastern Europe. They did a movie here about the Immortals years ago. This is incredible work.
Yeah.
So I bought this. I have no context of this. I have no idea what I'm reading. I had no idea what preceded or anything. The movie Outland had also come out. And I saw that.
Yeah.
Steranko. This is my introduction to Steranko before I learned about his shield work.
But the thing that makes those anthology books so great is the way they're written. You don't have to have the earlier parts to them. If it's written really clearly, you can walk in right in the middle and get everything that you need to get, which I think is something our modern writers tend to forget about.
That is true. That is very true. This was very accessible for many of us. You made the effort. I mean, I'm not the vocabulary here, the context, all these things. But if you're interested in something, you make the effort. It's not really work.
Right.
Right.
And this guy had this. What did this guy have? Who is this Chaikin guy? Cody Starbuck. This was my introduction to Chaikin.
And I love Chaikin. Like, he's got a good rough style to him. And I think one of his, like, that Marvel Comics Presents, the Moonstalker issue, I love it. It's one of my favorite ones, and nobody ever talks about it.
Chaikin is also, well, we'll see. He's an important writer to me as well. But what really changed things for me is this comic here. Guido Kripax's Valentina. And that's that woman there is a picture you see in what Gary was showing. Valentina is by Kripax. And this story here, what you see back here, you see Valentina and Valentina there. This is
that's from the Italian comic strip, though, right?
Bingo.
The newspaper, yeah.
Yeah, this Valentina originally appeared in Linus magazine in Italy. Linus is after the Peanuts, because what the Italians were doing, they would publish Peanut strips, Terry and the Pirates, and European stuff like this, because they respect the medium. They don't see it's just for children, right?
Right.
This story here just stunned me. Yes, you have this naked woman, right? She's talking to an astronaut. And she's talking, and then the astronaut, but she's dreaming this. Then the astronaut becomes her, and then it becomes a man again. Then the astronaut's taking what looks like some kind of sirens. This is before I read the Odyssey. And she's taken from him. And then this is the part that did it for me. She wakes up, and she has a son who's been having nightmares about killing dragons. And it's extremely hot in the apartment. That's why they're in a state of undress. And this completely changed things for me. This stuff by Kripax, it left a strong mark on the type of stories that I wanted, and I wanted more of this. This eventually led me to get, obviously, Heavy Metal #1. I know when you had Unruly Simeon, we have very similar tastes. I mean, Mobius, everyone is here. Drouet. This led me to Milo Manara. I mean, you all know who we're talking about. Sir Pierre. Everyone led here. And it led me to one of my favorite comics that appeared there, Ranzrox. This here is just disappeared because I was able to buy the magazine every once in a while until I get caught when they realized you were buying this at the shop. And but one of the issues in years later was when Ranzrox appeared. He's basically made of Xerox machines. He's a robot whose girlfriend is like 13, 14 years old. But you live in a hedonistic Rome. There's no morality of any kind. Children walk around with acid pistols. A girl asks for flowers at a restaurant. The people say, we don't want to be bothered. Ranzrox crushes her hand. This is an incredible piece of work. Absolutely stunning. The artwork. I've read this many times. This runs into just 3 volumes. And so it introduced me to this world. So already as a young child, these are the type of stories that I wanted. And when I said this was tough to choose, because I was starting to read Legion of Superheroes, I was reading Teen Titans, I was reading the X-Men, Daredevil. But this is something entirely different. And I think the other ones in quality, they're the same. But this was something. Usually you jump into these things at a later stage. I started very young with these. And I saw the comic medium as something, not just as superheroes or something just for kids, but something that you can do anything with these things. Absolutely.
Right. It's an open medium wherever your imagination takes you and your talent.
Oh, one more thing before I forget. Before I showed the Epic, when I was reading Epic, this is one of my fifth one. It was tough to do. Mythology of an Abandoned City by John J. Muth.
Oh.
In the early epics from 83, 84, he did this story. Mm-hmm. This is before he did Moonshadow. This is basically like a Cold War story, like a science fiction Cold War story with East Berlin. About a man trying to get a woman to basically go over the wall. And you have all these
art. So nice.
Very few words. Still a story I really don't completely understand. But this appeared in the Epic magazines. And eventually when I found the trade, I got it. But again, I have the Epics. So this really, and of course, this would be the early 80s when you had songs by Ultravox, like Vienna. Right. I like the new romantic music with the appropriate.
I haven't heard Vienna in years.
Yeah, right. Gary Newman, David Bowie had gone in this direction. This is right. When New Order was the Joy Division, the New Order. Mm-hmm. You had again Duran Duran, the early albums by Duran Duran. The influence of Roxy music is still prevalent here with Brian Ferry. I mean, it's all this stuff I was listening to, and then getting this, and so.
Now imagine Gore, if we ever got a story that had Valentina, Barbarella, and Laureline in it. Laureline from the Lost City.
Perfect, absolutely perfect. I mean, because Valentina.
Laureline's great too.
Absolutely, no, it would fit in perfectly in the world of Valentina. Absolutely. Which one are we on now, Gary? Number.
Well, I got your Xerox guy was last, so we're on number 5.
5, okay.
If I haven't lost count, because I know you threw some extras in, but I counted them with the other ones because I thought.
Yeah, basically the last ones were all heavy metal, which is
right.
Heavy metal.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
So then we would be on 4. If all that was heavy metal, then we're on 4.
1 and 4. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Then we get to this guy right here.
Show whatever you want to show, Gar. Numbers be damned.
Well, you guys familiar with Bud? Remember Mile High Comics and Bud Plant?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I got a Comic Scene magazine, and it showed a bunch of stuff. And I cut out the coupon to order the Bud Plant catalog. I get the Bud Plant catalog. And I was looking through the Comic Scene and some other, and 1 or 2 other, and then the Bud Plant catalog, all those illustrations. And I ordered from that thing Judge Dredd #1, which introduced me to Brian Boland. John Sable Freelance, which I was familiar with Warlord, but it didn't enchant me. But I got Mike Grell's John Sable Freelance.
Yeah.
I got a bunch of stuff that arrived in the mail.
Brian Boland's another favorite. Camelot 2000 is one of my all-time favorite things.
I know. And I remember when that came out, but I wasn't. Yeah, I didn't get it though, but I ordered Judge Dredd, and one of the things I ordered was this Warrior.
Cool,
nice.
Ooh. Now this is 83, I think 82, 83. Now this is important because it led me to Miracle Man.
Yes,
that's where Miracle Man appears.
Yes. Mm-hmm. There we go.
We all know. V for Vendetta.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, eventually I got a Warrior #1, but this is the one that I ordered. Thinking, again, I was a kid, didn't know, thinking the whole book was going to be about this guy, Axel Prescott.
Right.
I opened the book. First disappointment, it's all in black and white. I don't mind black and white, but I was thinking it'd be in color. But the worst thing is, it's an anthology. An ongoing anthology. And I wanted the story about this guy. But then I read the Miracle Man story and the V for Vendetta story. And briefly, I'll just talk about the V for Vendetta story. Those of you familiar with the comic or the film, the one that I got is the story that's here is V has gone to visit the doctor from the concentration camp.
Yep.
And the woman already has one of those flowers, one of those roses. And she suspects she knows who V is because it's one of the people she experimented on. And she's in bed, and V shows up. And you see this man with this mask and this cloak and this hat. I have no idea what this is. Not a clue. I have no idea who Fox was. Nothing.
Right.
But the artwork by Lloyd in black and white, the words by someone named Alan Moore. And she says, "Are you here to kill me?" And he says, "Yes." And she cries out of joy. She goes, "Thank you." And then I turn the page, and that's where it ends, you know? And right before that, you see a police officer having an argument with his wife because saying that she's not attractive enough, slaps her around. This is not Batman and the Joker. This is something entirely different. And the Miracle Man story was drawn by someone named Alan Davis. I mean, I say someone again because later on I would see Alan Davis on Detective Comics. And you see Superman, you see, Miracle Man basically killing off his adversaries, but he's got a look of like an Apollo or a Greek god. And you're thinking, Superman wouldn't do that. And like many of us here, my experience with Superman was the wonderful Chris Reeve film,
Right.
which I saw in the theater and adored and still do. And before I started to read the comics. So Warrior Magazine was just something that just poof, you know, but it put the name of Alan Moore in my head. So in 1983, when he began writing Swamp Thing, I already knew who he was. My brief experience with him here. And then when you get to this comic here, this is an extraordinary comic, one of the most violent issues, where Miracle Man and Kid Miracle Man have it out in London. But before he even gets there, he's slaughtered most of the population of London. He's done horrendous things, Kid Miracle Man. And how this ends, I won't spoil it for those of you who haven't read this, is quite shocking. But this, you know, he was writing this before Watchmen, but he finished the storyline after Watchmen. So this came after Watchmen when Eclipse took the rights for it and finished it off. But these were extraordinary comics that I often revisit. So,
Gore, let me ask you, what have you thought about the completion of the Silver Age by Neil Gaiman that he finished recently?
You know, I read the first issue, and I thought it was just okay. But the problem that I had with Neil stuff, because, well, let me rephrase that. The problem I had with Neil, because Alan Moore did finish this with issue 16, I think, or 17. And then he wanted off the book. But Eclipse wanted to keep it going, so they brought Neil on, who wrote like a coda to it, right? I like those stories. They're slightly sentimental, but they're still very good stories. But I don't revisit those stories because, in my opinion, it ends with the issue right after this. And I tried to give a shot of the new one, but it just didn't interest me, and I didn't pursue it. So did you read it? Did you like it?
I did. I liked it for the most part.
Yes.
I'm very curious. Again, I'm not going to spoil it for the people who haven't read it. But considering the book you were holding up, I'm very curious to see how this all ties in together with what they hinted at the end of the last issue. So
okay.
And I'll say more when we get offline. So
well, I wonder if we'll ever get more of it, because now that Neil Gaiman is he's in a problematic world of trouble.
He's indisposed.
He's indisposed. I like this young Miracle Man focused story that we got.
Okay.
And that's all.
Now, Gore, you know they have the Alan Moore available in an omnibus, the Miracle Man omnibus. They have the Alan Moore edition.
You know, I've been thinking about getting that, but my advice to people is to get the Eclipse issues, because I was on a live stream with Tim Hallermouse about a month or two ago discussing the early Alan Moore stuff. And remember when Marvel reprinted these after 2010? And there's this the issue before this, when Kid Miracle Man becomes Miracle Man. I mean, the awful creature he is. There's a panel where he kills a nurse, right? And there's some dialogue there. For some reason, Marvel in the reprints in the Marvel comics cut out the dialogue, just left it blank. Ooh. And I was asking Tim, do you know why they did that? There's nothing inappropriate there. And he didn't know that. I go, I have no idea, he said. And I have no idea either. So I haven't thumbed through an Omni because I haven't seen one around here. But that's what I'm going to do. Did they cut that out? Why did they do that? So the Eclipse comics are affordable. This is the only expensive one. This is a very expensive book. And maybe issue number 1. But the other ones are rather cheap.
Issue number 1 is also rather affordable. This was in Wizard Magazine multiple times when I was a kid as the most violent comic book ever printed. I'm sure it no longer is, but back in the 90s, it was constantly regarded as the most violent comic book ever printed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I suspect, what's his name? Snyder borrowed some ideas for his Superman film. Those of you, when Metropolis is basically demolished, and also the fight with Zod. And when I saw it in the theater, I'm thinking, hey, that's from Miracle Man. So yes. Okay, because the next one, in that list of books that I got in the mail, like this guy, I got this guy. Boom.
Oh yeah, American
flag.
Whoa, excellent.
So now this was tough to read because this is definitely for mature readers. Mm-hmm. Even the lettering, you have word bubbles in different spots. Chaykin is definitely writing for an adult audience, not just because you see women in stockings and such, like pretty much like this, right? Mm-hmm. But the artwork in this thing, absolutely remarkable. The artwork in this one is actually signed by Howard. Let me show some of the panels, some of the artwork, and get a sense of it. This was it's a science fiction story, as many of you guys know here. It takes place in the year 2031. In 1996, there was something called the domino effect, where there was nuclear war. There was a plague that wiped out most of Asia. Iran and Israel have nuked each other. London has been nuked because Germany has rearmed. There are three superpowers. There's the South American one, which is capitalistic. The Pan-African one, which is communist. And the American one is allied with the Russians. But the Americans have relocated to Mars and the moon. Now, there's no aliens in the story. This is not that type of story. The cities are run by gangs. So people, for safety, live in these massive malls. And the U.S. is now basically called Plexus USA. And the malls are governed, our law and order is by they're like the Texas Rangers. But here they're the Plexus Rangers. Saturday nights, there's a TV show that has subliminal messages. It's intentional, called Bob Violence, to get the biker gangs who are hooked on drugs to just go on a rampage. You have people who are hooked on, instead of their phones, they're hooked on television. But all television is pretty much sex-driven, violence-driven. And Ruben Flagg lives in Mars. So when he comes to, and he was an actor who was replaced by artificial intelligence. He doesn't call it artificial intelligence, but that's what it is. His image has been recreated. They don't need him anymore. Right. And he was doing like a parody of one of the Rangers. So he gets a job as one of the Rangers. So he has all these ideals of what the U.S. should be because he's watched American films of the past. However, on Earth, all television, like old shows like The Twilight Zone, everything are banned. So if you have a copy of them, they're very valuable. The storylines in here like one of the first ones is Brazil wants to buy the state of Illinois. Another storyline, you have these right-wing militias who want to basically using birth control that everyone uses to contaminate it and exterminate the people of Chicago because it would affect their immune system so they can take over. Now, regarding the right-wing militias, even though they're nationalistic and racist, the members of it are of all races, African American, Hispanic, and everything. And kind of like, how you have with groups here, right? Who are the blending of all these groups. So Chaykin in this thing, the stuff he was seeing way back then in this comic, because I revisited this comic not too long ago, the first 26 issues, because he wrote and drew the first 26, 28, with maybe in between two of them were not drawn by him. And he covers a lot of territory in this thing. So as a kid, this would have been the year of Blade Runner. This would have been the year of all those wonderful films. This was something that I just grabbed me. But one thing I remember about this comic, my peers didn't like that I was reading it. As some of you here, Pauline, remember this, is back then there's the DC readers, the Marvel readers, the Catholics, the Protestants. You don't interact with the two. And then you had the independent readers. Right. I was a heretic because I read all three. And some of my friends would say, why are you reading that? It has sex in it and all this stuff in it. But I liked it, And so shortly after this, we moved to a city that had a comic shop. And then just for lack of money, I was only able to buy some things, but I was buying stuff like this.
It's interesting because the one writer to interrupt Chaykin was Alan Moore.
Yeah,
and it has a similar tone, but a different one. There's not this jarring shift. It's just kind of more of the same theme, so to speak.
Yeah, they did. They were both. You see, the Cold War deeply, affected all of us, everyone from that generation. And they definitely infused it. And nuclear war was always a threat. Was a threat back then, and there was part even in the music. You saw that in songs from back then. Remember 99 Love Balloons by Nina?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember too from back in the day, there was always like an end of days apocalypse theory, like the earth is going to end on this day. And then I remember telling my parents, they were like watching things that they said that in the news or something. The earth is supposed to end according to this. I'm like, well, it can't end. That's a school day. It wouldn't be that easy.
In the TV shows, when this was coming out, TV shows that I liked a lot back then, because again, this was tough to do. I almost picked John Sable Freeland instead of this one. And because I got it at the same time, remember the show The Equalizer?
Oh, yeah.
You remember that, yes.
Man, with Edward Woodward, to this day, it's one of my favorite shows from the 80s, and I can rewatch that thing.
I watched it every week, Gore. I was right in front of the TV waiting for it to come on.
Same.
And the first time I saw like a commercial, I'm like, this guy is supposed to be a tough guy. And then you watch it like, oh, this is good.
Yeah.
So well done.
And his Burning Man is still the only Burning Man.
That's right. The Wicker Man.
The Wicker Man, yes.
Wicker Man, that's right.
I just gave away the ending by accident.
It's funny you mentioning 80s stuff. I just refound Spencer for Hire on Amazon Prime.
That was good. I remember that.
Which is, and I'm only through like half the first season. It is surprisingly strong. I forgot how good that series was. And
it still holds up after all these decades.
It does. Well, you got Avery Brooks in there for one thing. So, I mean, it can't be bad with Avery Brooks in there. But it holds up remarkably well. It's a real love letter to Boston. So
that's pretty cool. That's good. I remember watched the first season of it. I watched a lot of television as a kid, and I was a good student, and I was basically a good kid, and so I would be rewarded to watch whatever I wanted. And so with television, I read a lot. I saw whatever I could, and with comics, I had no boundaries what I could get. Just the issue of money and what I could get my hands on. So I guess the next one I'm going to get to is when we moved to a comic shop. Finally got to a place where they had a comic shop, and I discovered when I had read about it is Love and Rockets.
Love and Rockets.
sweet.
this is issue number 1, which reprints the reprint of the first issue, which is very expensive. It looks nothing like this. And Love and Rockets is an anthology. It's still going on. And it was done by 3 brothers, Jaime, Gilbert, and Mario. And what got me here was the Jaime stories, which are about Hopi and Maggie. Stories set in the mid-'80s in LA about 2 teenage girls. Hopi's a punk rocker. Maggie is a mechanic. The early stories have some science fiction blend, but you have female wrestling in the comic. You have really sharp dialogue. They're both Maggie's Hispanic. Hopi is not. And I mentioned that because you didn't really see Hispanic characters in comics back then. And now that's not the reason it resonated with me. Those things were never important to me. It was, for me, it's a story work. I don't have to identify with a character. I don't have to like a character. I just have to find them interesting. It doesn't have to be about me for me to like it. Right. The comics that I showed you, I really little in common with any of these guys.
Right.
And
that's what made it so good, was that you were in a whole nother realm. To me, that I didn't want it to be like me. I wanted it to be something different.
Absolutely. When I was a kid, I would watch the wonderful Tarzan films, the Johnny
Weissmuller.
Yeah. And whenever Boy would appear, I would get really angry. I don't want to see Boy in there. As a kid, you want to grow up. You want to be a man. You want to have those muscles. You want to be able to jump those trees. You want to be able to have a beautiful woman like Jane with you. Even before the sex drive kicked in, you wanted that. And so that's why I never liked Robin and Batman. Robin would appear in the comics. I don't want to see Robin. I want to see Batman.
Well, obviously, some of us had some very different tastes.
So with Love and Rockets, the stories, I'll mention 2 stories here that got me. Hopi and Maggie get invited by their friend Penny Century, whose boyfriend is this rich guy. Now, they're still teenagers. So they go to this residence. It's like a labyrinth of an estate. And they're getting served dying like the kings and queens there. But it's such a big place that Maggie gets lost going to the bathroom. And when she goes to the bathroom, this man grabs her. This man's like twice her age. And he's in hiding. He's in hiding. I forget what the reasons are. But basically, they begin a love affair in that room for about a week. And this was just a remarkable story. What's happening here, right? And it still remains one of my favorite Love and Rocket stories. And this other story, which is collected which appeared years later, is the story of this woman here, who's a friend of theirs. Her name is Isabel, or Izzy. And this is a well-known story called Flies on the Ceiling. She's a friend of, she's older. She's a friend of Hopi and Maggie. And her story is she starts out like a writer, gets married to a professor. Things are going okay. But then things go south. And in the story, she divorces her husband and goes to Mexico. While she's in Mexico, she's having these flashbacks, arguments with her father, heated arguments with her father, violent arguments with her father, arguments with her husband, and she has an abortion. In Mexico, she meets a man who has a son. His wife has been dead. They get along very well, and he treats her very nice. The boy's enchanted with her. Everything should be fine, but she can't let go of her past. And she says no to him, no to the boy. And when she returns back to California, she always sees flies in the ceiling. She's always like trying to swat them. She lets herself go, doesn't eat very much, gets into new age, witchcraft type of stuff. And becomes a recurring character in our story, but a sad character, and who's still around, because Love and Rockets is still going around because everyone aged in real time. So now Maggie and Hopi, who were teenagers, are now in their early 50s. But this, again, reading this as a kid, only one other kid was reading Love and Rockets at the time, and he was a punk rocker. I was not a punk rocker, although I liked some punk music. But no one else was reading it that I knew. To this day, it remains one of my favorite comics of all time, which I picked up at the comic shop when we moved to that city. And I was able to get it, and it's been with me ever since.
Nice.
Wow.
Mhm.
Now you had mentioned Tarzan and like, as a boy wanting that Jane.
Mhm.
I mean, in the films, you've had some great Janes. Like you had Annie McDowell and Grace Stoke. But then Miles O'Keefe got Bo Derek as Jane.
I forgot about that. I forgot about that one.
Well, everybody has. I mean, the only reason to remember it's Bo
Yeah.
Derek.
You know, didn't they
Derek-
dub the voice?
We've mentioned her over and over.
Didn't they dub the voice of Andy McGow with Glenn Close?
Yes, they did.
Why
Because she
would you-
couldn't
why
do
would
a
you
British
love
accent
Annie
very
McDowell?
well.
And I think Annie McDowell is one of those underrated beauties too. She's just got such a natural beauty to her.
Was that the reason they dubbed it? They didn't like her.
I think it's because her British accent wasn't very good. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Of course, I think the best Jane is still Maureen O'Sullivan. So I mean,
That is true. That is
Yeah.
true. I liked her as a kid because I would watch all those old films. Because when we lived here in Texas, we still got the Mexican programming back then. We would get them. So we had the 3 channels, PBS, and the Spanish language channels from Mexico. And we'd watch the Mexican films and such, like El Santo and Mil Máscaras and Blue Demon, which was basically the wrestlers by day, superheroes by night. Those were the early action figures we had as a kid. Those are the ones I brought back from Mexico. And so wrestling is very important in Mexico. So, and anyway, but also wrestling appears in these comics, and when no one else would have them. So, Still Love and Rockets is another one on the list.
Nice.
And I gotta say, one of my favorite Annie McDowell movies where I really discovered her, and nobody watched the movie, and I thought it was great, was with her and Gerard Depardieu with Green Card.
Green Card.
It's
I
such
remember-
an enjoyable film.
Mm.
I was carrying parcels,
What a
and
grunt.
she was carrying parcels.
Heard a grunt.
I did not like it.
Gerard Depardieu is great because he's like the most uncommon. He's like the common man when you're watching him.
I think, but Depardieu, the first film that I saw with him was in 1987, Jean de Florette and Manon of Spring, with Emmanuel Baer. You guys may know Emmanuel Baer because she was a femme fatale in the first Mission Impossible film with Tom Cruise.
Ooh.
But in Manon of Spring, she's just absolutely ravishing. And Gerard Depardieu is her father, who's a hunchback. And it's a revenge film. It's a 2-parter, and I saw it in the theater at the time. And her father is he dies a premature death, but it's due to some people's doing. And little Manon grows up and wants revenge. So it's called Jean de Florette and Manon of Spring. Some of my favorite films of all time are those 2 movies.
French films were so good in that era too.
Yeah, French films are just good. I just really like them. So anyway, so the next one, I want to keep you guys going on too long here. Is let's see with you guys. Let's see which one is next. Okay, here we go. I was looking through the comic shop, and again, the artwork would draw me to things. And I picked up this issue, Matt Wagner's Mage.
Mhm.
Nice. I've heard good things about it, but never read it.
Yeah.
You need to read it.
What got me about Mage, again, this is 1980, 84, 85, I think? Maybe 83, 84. Oh, he's 85. Now think of the comics, how they were drawn by DC and Marvel at the time. And then I see this. I'm thumbing through it, and I see these beautiful colors. Right? I'm thinking, what is this? I had no idea what this was. This is basically an Arthurian legend story in the present. That's supposed to be like King Arthur. But he's modeled after Matt Wagner. So I'm enchanted by this comic. I mean, the artwork is great, but this is the one that did it for me. I turn the page, and he has a backup story.
Mm-hmm.
Grendel.
Yes.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
I see him taking this little girl. Her name is Stacy, as I learned from here. Again, I don't know what the previous issue, but I went to get it the next time I went to the comic shop. But look how he's telling the story here.
Yeah.
You have a lot of text, but look at the artwork, how he has the panels.
Right, like what great design.
This is an incredible piece of work. And I learned who Grendel is. Briefly, who Grendel is. When he's about 14 years old. Well, first he's a prodigy. He's a prodigy, and that led me. Okay, let me get this here. Bingo. This is Grendel.
Yes.
Here's what I was
nice.
Number one. Not his first appearance. First appearance is in Comico Primer. Forget which issue. Two. Very expensive book. I don't have that, but I have this. This came before Mage, and I wasn't aware of this till later. So Grendel is a prodigy, and what Matt Wagner did here in under 40 pages, it tell his story. When he's 14 years old, he, I think, is in London at a fencing competition. I think he loses the match. I think he lets the guy win or something like that. A trainer, this woman named Jocasta Rose, takes an interest in him and says, "You let the guy lose." She's, again, 36. He's 14. They become lovers. And for about a year or two, she teaches him everything he needs to know about fencing and basically about many other things. It's a consensual relationship.
Right.
Again, this is the 80s, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she has a terminal illness, though, and she dies shortly thereafter. Now, he doesn't know this. Now, his name is Eddie, but when she dies, he changes his name to Hunter and takes her last name, Rose. He comes back to America. Again, his parents are dead. He begins to write novels, literary novels that are bestsellers when he's basically a teenager. And he becomes part of the criminal underworld. So now you have a comic, you have a character who is not an anti-hero. He is a villain. Something we've been used to since the 2000s with The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, all these type of stories, right? Where we just see these terrible people do terrible things and we can't stop watching them. And that's what he is. The girl you see there is a girl named Stacy. He has just he's poisoned her uncle, framed another woman for it, who gets the electric chair for it. This is Grendel, Hunter Rose. But he's something about Stacy that just attracts him, not sexually, but he's attracted to her like paternally. So he takes her under his wing. She doesn't know that he has killed her uncle. So the story that he does in the backup of Mage is to basically, as he becomes within a few years, so by the time he's 2021, he is like the kingpin of New York City crime world, while basically having this as Grendel, but as, like I said, like his Bruce Wayne equivalent, he is a famous writer. Eventually, things will be undermined when Stacy finds out who he is. And the story is told from the point of view of Stacy's daughter, Christine, who will later become Grendel. And we learn the tragic end of Grendel, of Hunter Rose. Well, not tragic, his demise, but it's the tragic end of that little girl you saw, who, after everything is done, Hunter Rose is killed. She's institutionalized for 11 years. And when she's released, she goes to therapy, falls in love with a therapist who appears to be a good guy. But on their wedding night, he rapes her.
Mm-hmm.
And then hangs himself.
Jesus.
But she becomes pregnant with Christine, the narrator of the story. Again, that's all in here. You know, again, some of the comics I read when I was a kid. You know, so I said all this up because by the time I did not read many books at the time as a kid. I read some books, not a lot. So, but when I read Hamlet in high school, and when I read Wuthering Heights, introduced to Heathcliff and Cathy, they were kind of like all these characters we've been talking about in these comics. I felt like I understood them.
Right.
And I got it.
You connected to them on some
Bingo.
level.
I got it.
Yeah.
I got it. You know.
So what's your favorite Shakespeare?
Hamlet, easily.
Merchant of Venice.
Merchant of Venice? Why Merchant of Venice?
I like the comedic elements in it. They offset nicely.
Nicely. And
Mine's Othello.
Othello. Yes,
Othello's good. That's a heavy one.
it is.
No, I like Macbeth. So
Well, Abraham Lincoln, his favorites were Macbeth and Hamlet. And he could quote passages from memory. We know this because he had two secretaries, John Hay, who later became a great Secretary of State, and John Nicolai, I think. And they had these notes that would record this. In the middle of the night, he would come and talk to them because he couldn't sleep because the Civil War was on his mind. And he would just quote stuff from Hamlet and Shakespeare. And one of the ironies is that one of his favorite actors was John Wilkes Booth, and who we probably saw on the stage perform Shakespeare, and not knowing that same man who brought him so much pleasure would be the man to end his life, in April of 1865 when he's at the theater. So anyway, so that's the other one is Grendel.
Nice.
What number are we at, Mr. Gary? And running out of time.
You are on number 8.
8.
You just did the Mage Grendel, which was 7.
Okay. 7. Okay.
Now I got to read Merchant of Venice again. I haven't read it in years.
No, Merchant of Venice I've never read. And,
it's a quick read. It's not very long. It's one of his shortest.
Or once I have Shakespeare's books. I have his collected works here, but that one I've never tried. So in that same venue that I'm buying comics, I pick up this guy, not this issue, but there's an important issue, Cerebus.
Oh, nice.
This is issue number 6, the first appearance of Jaka. And Jaka is the love interest for Cerebus. Now, as Gary probably knows, Cerebus is basically a parody of Conan the Barbarian, except he's an aardvark set in some other world. And Jaka is his love interest. And this collection here has Jaka's story. And so I'm at the comic shop, and just to give you an idea of Dave Sim's artwork, I begin opening the comic, and I begin to see stuff like this. I'm thinking, what is this? The artwork is just riveting to me. And it's Dave Sim, who's from Canada. And at one point, he issued issue 60-something, I think. Gerhard is his collaborator. And Cerebus ran for 300 issues. And it remains, I think it's a North American masterpiece in the medium. The first 20-some issues are basically, Cerebus is a barbarian. All he wants is gold. That's all he cares about. And power. But in issue number 6, he meets a Terran girl named Jaka, who happens to be an aristocrat, but she's rejected that life to be a Terran girl, to be a dancer. And in the story, what Dave Sim did with Cerebus is that Jaka comes in and out of Cerebus's life. And it's like Dr. Zhivago. As we've seen Dr. Zhivago, or read the novel, where Laura comes in and out of his life, of Zhivago's life. Even when she's out of it, she's always on his mind. Same with Jaka here. It completely enchanted me, these stories. Briefly, there's early on when, because Cerebus, at one point, after being a barbarian, he becomes prime minister. That's the church and state story. Then he becomes the Pope. They have the Pope in this world. And when he's about to become prime minister, Jaka shows up. and has a sword that he loses. But he thinks she's just there because he's about to become somebody powerful. He completely misreads her and humiliates her. In the second part where she appears is he's prime minister, and she's there to warn him that there's going to be an overthrow. He's going to be overdone. He's going to be killed. And she goes, run away with me. He says no. The third time she appears early on is she's already the Pope. Now, as a Pope, you can dissolve marriages. She shows up. She's now married. He's just been married to a woman named Sophia, who's based on Red Sonja. Because Dave Sim would parody Marvel and DC characters. And so it's Red Sophia instead of Red Sonja. And the Red Sophia instead of Red Sonja. And so he's dissolved that marriage with her. So he wants now Jaka to marry. He goes, I'm already married. And he goes, well, I'll dissolve the marriage. And she says, no. So what he decides, he gives up the popeship, becomes a barbarian again. She goes, we're going to run away together. But she goes, I can't. Why? I'm pregnant. I'm not going to leave my husband. And she leaves. And then we don't see her again until we get to Jaka's story. When Therabus, no longer Pope, no longer Prime Minister, no money at all, shows up at a tavern and sees Jaka and her husband, Rick. And we get this beautiful story. Whenever I recommend Cerebus, I say begin here. Even though it's about not technically the middle, but the first quarter of the story or so, and then go back. It's a very moving story because what happens to Jaka in this story and the baby and afterwards. It's just an enchanting story. Oscar Wilde appears in here, but he's not called Oscar Wilde. He looks like Oscar Wilde. He writes like Oscar Wilde, and he's telling her story. In later issues, F. Scott Fitzgerald, but he's not called F. Scott Fitzgerald, appears. And another storyline, Hemingway appears. It's a remarkable piece of work, but it's not really accessible, really, to most readers because you really have to be committed to it. Dave Sim doesn't make it easy. You'll have like a sentence or a paragraph that something had happened in issues way earlier. It's like a novel. And he doesn't cite where to go to that. You just have to remember. Mm-hmm. And but it's something I've read the Jaka story maybe two, maybe no, three, at least 3 times in my life. And I'll probably read it again this year. Beautiful work.
Nice.
Yeah. Learn all kind of new books.
Dude, I love those books that you always revisit in your life. I mean, we all have, and then people don't understand that either, right? Gore Vidal, why would you read the same book twice? Why would you watch the same movie twice? Why would you? The experience is still the experience. The journey is still the journey.
Oh, yeah.
If you love the journey, you're gonna love it again. There's a comfort in going back and re-experiencing those journeys too.
That's what makes something a classic of anything is you revisit it.
Right.
Over
I
and
think
over.
the fact that we can find new things when we go back
That's right.
is really powerful.
Yes.
So now I'm at university. And when I'm at university, I'm living in a dorm. And when I'm living in a dorm, I put up a poster. And the poster that I put up is this one here. I had it marked. Which brings me to my next comic. I put this on the wall, and people are walking by and they're going, is that Gustav Klimt? I go, no. Francis Bacon? No. Who is that? I said, Bill Sienkiewicz. Oops. Wrong one. Sorry. It's Bill Sienkiewicz. There we go.
It's fighting you.
Yes.
Is that his Electra, right?
Yeah.
Electra Assassin. Bingo. When this thing came out in 1986, this is the issue right there. To this day, this remains my favorite Frank Miller work. My favorite Bill Sienkiewicz work, period. I'm not saying it's their best work. I'm not arguing that, although maybe one day I might try to do that. But this is something that is out of the Iliad. He has never written Electra the same way again. This one is signed and by both Bill and Frank Miller. She is a force of nature in this book. Basically, in the story, is you have the hand has conjured up a demon, which has basically taken over the next president of the United States, whose face always looks the same, smiling, hair parted to the side, who wants to bring nuclear Armageddon. And the person who's going to stop him is going to be Electra. This story takes place before she appeared with in Matt Murdock's life. So the first issue has her at some kind of asylum where she's drugged, and you have all these her memories, remembering her past with her father. It does read like something out of Greek mythology, Greek tragedy. The artwork is incredibly stark. I thought when I saw this as a kid, I was thinking, what the heck is this?
Right.
This is extraordinary. And I thought everyone would be blown away. But no, it was absolutely crickets. None of my friends read this. And those that I heard had tried it, they were completely put off by this. Absolutely put off by this. And I could not understand it. To this day, I can't understand it. Even Bill Sienkiewicz in interviews said when him and Frank Miller finished this book, they thought they had done something quite remarkable. And the reaction would be explosive. It wasn't. It was crickets.
Yeah, and those books are still, you can get them for like $1 each.
You can. You absolutely can. Electra barely says a word. I don't even think she says anything throughout the story. Now, the incredible work of Bill Sienkiewicz, because as he's doing this, he's doing Love and War. This is a Kingpin story. Originally, it was supposed to be in continuity with Daredevil. But if I remember correctly, Jim Shooter, when he saw the artwork and he saw this is not going to work. You can't do it there. Just do it as a graphic novel. And so he did. And this is a story where Vanessa is ill and the Kingpin wants a way to save her. It's a love letter to Vanessa in many ways from the Kingpin's point of view. And with this gallery edition, it collected everything there. But this book here remains definitely my favorite Electra story of all time.
Nice.
You know, I picked up an issue of that, and I think mine's signed.
Oh, wow.
I thought it was part of the... Well, I didn't know. I just pulled it out.
Wow.
And it says...
You mean the gallery edition?
Like underneath the gun there, it's got his name. I thought it was part of the print.
Oh,
wow. I got a signed one. I was like,
you may have lucked out there, Jim.
Yeah, I didn't know that it was. I thought it was part of the print.
Wow. I guess the last one right now, is that the last one now?
Now you're on number 10.
10. Final one is something more recent, like the 90s. Is this book here, Strangers in Paradise.
Oh, okay, yeah.
This is by Terry Moore, who's from Houston and still lives there. And Strangers in Paradise is a story about, this is Kachu, and that's her friend Francine. Now, the reason I read this, I mean, I knew about it over the years, but didn't pay attention to it. But when Rachel Rising came out, I began to read it, and I said, I really like this. So I said, I'm going to give this a shot. And I found back issues and trades and read the thing. And this completely enchanted me. Absolutely. The title comes from a line from a play which Francine, the brunette, acting in. And I have the quote here. She says, she reads a line, I've learned you can't always go home. You can't always be warm inside. That without love, we're never more than strangers in paradise.
Wow.
And that's where the line comes from. So what you have here is the story of these two girls. Now, what is unusual about this comic, I was wrong about this. I thought it was something humorous, which it has. I thought it was just a story about these two girls. I'm thinking, well, I've already read Love and Rockets, and I like that. Maybe this is a ripoff of Love and Rockets, which it's not. Basically is these two girls meet in high school. Francine, a rather popular girl, likes theater. Kachu comes from a tough family. Her mother is married. Kachu's father is dead. The mother is now remarried. The stepfather sometimes rapes her. And when they meet they become friends. Kachu will visit Francine. She would knock on her window and climb in. Francine's world is perfect. Her family's perfect. They're very nice. Complete opposite of her world. Francine has no idea about Kachu's life until one night Kachu shows up all beaten up and says, basically, I'm leaving. And where are you going to go? I'm going to go with an aunt in another state. Now, this takes place in Houston. But she's lying. She's not going there. And so years pass, and Kachu comes back. And by this time, when she comes back, she's an artist. Francine is engaged to a lawyer. And then some things happen in the story, which are very, very unusual. I mean, it really surprised me. That's when this is not a conventional comic. All my biases, my preconceived ideas of it are completely wrong. Francine's fiance cheats on her. It upsets her. She goes to his place of work, and with the help of someone else, doesn't kill him, but doesn't hurt him, but has him undressed, taken to a department store, clown face, and he's hanging naked with something written, I think, on his chest or something. Humiliates him. It's rather a humorous piece. He files charges, because how does she do that, though? Files charges against her. While she's in jail, one of the deputies is getting rough with her. She goes all Black Widow on him, flips him over, and beats the crap out of him. Thinking, what? Where has she been these past years? Then we get a hint. She flies to Canada with no explanation. But her friend Francine and a friend named David, they eventually find out and they go over there. Why is she in Canada? They find out when she left, she didn't go see an aunt. She ran away to California, was homeless for years, had to do things to survive. Meets a prostitute named Emma, a high-class prostitute with certain clients. Emma, though, takes her in, is very kind to her for about 2 years, but then introduces her to a very sinister world. That's all I'll say. Years later, she finds out that Emma, living in Canada, is dying of AIDS. And that's where she goes, to be by her bedside. And that's a very moving story called A Dream of You. I've done a video about that story. A very powerful story. She's sitting by the bedside from this woman named Emma, who showed her loving kindness when she most needed it. And then as the story goes on, we learn about where she's been and the people she was around, and they come back. This was, as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, wow, this takes a turn like Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad is like chemist. Years later, you know what he turns out to be. You're thinking, how did that guy go here? These are not bad people. So it doesn't. But what I mean is that change. Like going, how does
Right,
this?
it's just drastic.
Bingo, a drastic. But Moore is absolutely brilliant. When friends of mine ask me, who's your favorite Texas writer? Top of the list, Robert E. Howard. He's from Texas. Larry McMurtry. Patricia Highsmith. She wrote the Talented Mr. Ripley novel. She's a Texan. Terry Southern, who wrote Easy Rider and Dr. Strangelove, right? I don't mention them. I say Terry Moore. And people go, who? So I go, he writes comics. So anyway. And I just get a roll of the eyes. So incredible work.
They don't know what they're missing, right?
They don't know what they're missing.
When you're ignorant to something new, you always cheat yourself.
It is.
And that's one of those series that really benefited from the big comics boom of the 90s. Because, that was on, I know I got introduced to it via Wizard of all things. Wizard highlighted it when they restarted the second series or something. And they didn't say much about the story. They just simply said, you have to read this.
Yeah.
And they were right. But
Moore writes really good dialogue. Him, Jaime Hernandez from Love and Rockets, and Larson from Savage Dragon. They handle humor, even talking about the mundane. They make it interesting. That's a skill. That's a talent that I don't think many writers have, and they're very good at it.
Yeah.
And so I guess of all the books here, probably the two, I guess, cheery books are Terry Moore, which has this undercurrent of, pathos and sadness, and Love and Rockets, which has those as well. But they make you smile. They both, Jaime Hernandez and Love and Rockets and Terry Moore, when you read their dialogue, their stories, they make you smile. And which is tough to do, I think. Yeah. So I guess we get to the spec.
Yeah, this is
yes, we do.
That was one of your story, right?
I'm sorry?
That was your story, your book with the story should be spec next.
Yeah, spec next, right?
Yes.
And then I'll do the last one will be the personal one, right?
Right.
Yes, I was going to say, let's do spec first so we can hear the personal story last.
Yeah.
Okay. Spec one is Modesty Blaze.
Excellent. Oh, very good.
And that's such a great cover. Look at that.
This is the beautiful, wonderful Jim Haldaway. This is one of the best comic strips I think ever made. Started in the early 60s. The publisher, I think, of one of the newspapers contacted Peter O'Donnell because, the Bond films and the Ian Fleming novels were,
right.
The storm, taking basically the literary and film world by storm.
Yeah.
And O'Donnell had been writing some strips at this time, and they go, "You want to do a new strip?" He goes, "Sure. What do you want to do? Whatever you want, but maybe do something." He didn't want to go the route of a Bond. He wanted to go the route maybe having a female lead, and he creates Modesty Blaze and Willie Garvin, two of the most interesting. They have the most interesting friendship in literature, because I think this is literature. I mean, it's something. The relationship is just incredibly unusual. I mean, basically, Peter O'Donnell got the idea because during the Second World War, he was stationed in Persia, it's Iran, and refugees from the Balkans were coming across the river, fleeing the Germans, and he saw a little girl. Now, she wasn't an Arab. Maybe he thought she was from one of the Eastern European countries. And she's getting water. And she's a little bit wary of the Brits. And they want to help her. They want to give her some food. But she seems, all she's wearing is a shirt, a bundle on her head. And she's got what O'Donnell notices on her neck is this piece of wood with this snail sticking out. They give her some food at a distance. And you could tell the girl's been through a lot. But she didn't look like someone who was afraid. She was a child. And this was 1942. Jump 20 years later, when he's asked about to do a strip, he thought about that girl. What if I do a story about a girl like that? And that's exactly what he did. What he did here was Modesty. That's not a real name. Neither her last name is Blaze. We never know her name. Her parents are at a refugee camp during the Second World War, one of the worst refugee camps. Few children survive. Her parents don't get out alive. She is able to escape, and she makes a device like that with the nail in the wood. She goes to another refugee camp where she sees this old man being beaten up, and she defends the man. She's like 12 years old, and she cuts the guy. The old man happens to be from Bucharest, a professor, knows many languages. So there's like similarities here with the Count of Monte Cristo. And so they come to an agreement. He'll protect her. I mean, she will protect him, and they'll be traveling together. So the next 4 or 5 years, they travel together to much of the Middle East and part of Eastern Europe. And she learns all these languages, all this culture. And he names her Modesty. Why? Because early on, she's usually in a state of undress. She's a little girl. And but usually she doesn't wear her top or anything. So he jokes, I'm going to call you Modesty. The reason she takes up the last name Blaze is that he introduced her to the Arthurian legends. And Merlin's tutor is named Blaze. So she takes that. Uh-huh. The old man dies when she's like 16 years old. And this is the first time she cries. She's held her grief all this time. When she's 17, she goes to Tangiers. And working at a casino, she comes under the eye of a crime lord. And she begins to work for him. The crime lord dies about a year or two later. She's 19 years old. She takes over. And she calls it the network. By the time she's 20, she's like Grendel, except she's not evil. They don't do human trafficking. They don't do murder. And they don't do drugs like heroin and such. They do smuggling and all kinds of stuff. One day she's in Saigon, 2021. There's a man who's having this fight, jiu-jitsu. She's really impressed by him. But he gets into trouble and he's in jail. She takes him out. His name is Willie Garvin. He looks just like Michael Caine. He was modeled after Michael Caine. And she takes him out. And when he looks at her, she looks like a princess. So throughout the strip and the novels, because there's novels that Peter O'Donnell wrote, he calls her princess. Mm-hmm. And for the next several years, again, they run the network. And then by 27, when she's 27, they retire. But then the Secret Service, the British Secret Service, says, we need help with certain things that we can't do legitimately. Will you come and help us? And they do it. And their relationship is, again, very unusual. They're never involved with each other, ever. So whenever they have lovers, the lovers can't understand when they meet Willie Garvin. He looks like Michael Caine. You look at Modesty Blaze, stunning woman. And you're like, so she's just a friend? Yeah, she's just a friend. Yeah. And you and her and you and him? No, never are. And now finish. If you haven't read the novels, I've read all of them, like 13 of them. They're phenomenal. Give you an idea of the relationship. In one of the stories, Willie Garvin, in years past, before he met Modesty, had fought this man, like the Kingpin, like you see in Born Again, who beats him to a pulp. And Willie Garvin is pretty good with a fight, but this guy nearly kills him. Years later, he meets him up again when he's with Modesty. He's now a crime lord. Anyway, he's pursuing Willie and pursuing Modesty, who's very badly injured. She can't do anything. They're out in the desert. They find this broken down home. Willie hides her and says, don't come out. I don't think he knows you're with me. She says, fine. He's going to go confront the man because he knows he's coming. They're unarmed. Willie knows he's not going to beat this guy, but at least Modesty will be safe. Well, for a little while, because again, she's badly hurt. He fights this man. It's brutal. He pummels him. there's no way he can win because psychologically, he already feels defeated for what happened to him before.
Right.
And then, very moving in the novel, he looks away, and what does he see? He's horrified. Modesty has crawled out and is sitting against the door outside, in full view of this guy who sees her. But when Willie sees her there, something snaps in him. And he fights like he's never fought before. Modesty did that on purpose, not for her own sake, but for Willie's sake. Just like he hid her, not for his sake, but for her sake. And he beats the guy. Because Modesty knows what he's up against. And the only way he's going to be able to defeat him is that he's fighting for her, because to save her life.
Right, because that's all he's got left is to save her.
That's a very moving part of the novel. And but the strip and the novels are like that.
Did the 66 movie do any justice to it? I've never seen it.
No, the 66 movie is like that James Bond film from the 50s, Casino Royale.
Right.
It's more like a parody. Yeah.
Oh,
it's nothing.
They don't take it seriously, huh?
No, the novel's serious throughout. There's some general humor, but no. The stuff is serious stuff here. And there's two endings to the strip. The strip ended where Willie and Modesty walk into the sunset. And then Peter O'Donnell, the creator, wrote a short story where he has an ending that follows after that. That is one of the most moving short stories I've ever read. I've read it several times, and it deeply affects you when you read it, especially if you know the history of these two. That's all I will say about that. But my spec is Modesty Blaze. I saw Greg Rucka a couple of years ago on Word Balloon, and I commented something about Modesty Blaze. And he said he had been interested in working on Modesty Blaze. And he knows that the reason they can't do a film or a TV show, some legal issues are involved. Because she is phenomenal. She's absolutely phenomenal. Gal Gadot would have been a perfect one because they got the look. They got the look for it. And so he said, that's all he said, that there was legal issues regarding a film or a TV series, but that's why we haven't seen it.
Now that's something I've never read.
Or somebody owns the rights and they haven't gotten permission to do it. It's usually something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's something like that, but I recommend the trades, and you find any one of the novels, I would recommend you pick them up, and I think you'll really like them. You won't be disappointed.
I might look. I'm probably going to look out for that. You know how I am about my strong female characters.
This is one of the best. I mean, she's extraordinary. Actually, many of them are here for me. Kachu, Electra, Maggie, her. Yeah, there's definitely a pattern here of strong female characters. Okay. Well, I guess the personal story, right?
Right.
Okay. This book I've reread many times, over and over again, and I read it when it came out. These are the issues that I had from back then, and it is Born Again.
Ooh. Oh, okay, nice.
This is the Born Again series. This is Daredevil, issue 227. But as we know, issue 27, 228, 29. Because basically it's just one big book, right? 230, 231, 32, and of course 33. With Daredevil and Born Again, I think most of you know the story for this book is...
Yeah, that I've read.
Karen Page has sold the identity of Matt Murdock to some people, and that he's Daredevil. It gets to the Kingpin. The Kingpin then finds a way to try to spiritually destroy Matt. Now, he doesn't know what's happening, doesn't know that that Karen has done this. And the story, when I think maybe I've shared this with you, Gary, on your stream, or maybe with John, and I remember when I was little, when we were still in Mexico, we had someone came to the door. We lived above a slaughterhouse. I remember that, and so you can always smell. There was like blood splattered on the sidewalks and such, and just sometimes it'd be rotting flesh down the sidewalk. And my mom we had no air condition, and my mom would wash the laundry like in this metal tub inside, and we had this fan, and there was no air coming through those windows. It was incredible heat. So we didn't have much money, and someone knocked on the door, and I went to get it, and there was this young woman, and she wanted to speak to, I guess, the head of the household, to my mom and my dad. And so I went to get my mother, and she came back, and she went to talk to the girl. Then I see my mom walk to get her purse, and she gets her purse, and she takes some money and goes back and gives it to this girl. And again, we don't know who this girl is. She's just a stranger. I asked my mom, I said, who was that? And I goes, I don't know. It's just some woman asking for some money because her child is very sick. Now, the woman didn't have a child with her. And I said, how do you know it's true? She could be lying. My mother just looked at me and said, yes, she could be lying. But what if she isn't lying? So I won't have any sugar with my coffee this week. It doesn't cost me anything. And that was the example of my mother. She was basically, her conduct was loving kindness in her behavior towards others. Even though she endured many hardships in her life, she never became bitter about it. And one wouldn't blame her, I think, if she did. She was never the type to say, I had to struggle, so they have to struggle. That type of thing. And so that always stayed with me. And she didn't do it. Now, we were Catholic. Again, I was an altar boy. When we came here, I went to private school. And so I was an altar boy for the morning masses. She never saw it for a reward in the afterlife. And she never told what people did. Whenever she did nice things for others, she never told other people that she did. She just did it. So things like that always stayed with me, because I've met people like her in my life. They're rare, but they exist, right? They do exist in this world. So when Born Again came out, and I read this story about Matt when he's beaten to a pulp by the kingpin, and he's remembering how he became, when he became blind, his memories of his father at the hospital, but also of a woman who shows up at the hospital who has a cross. And he makes a promise to this woman that for him to use his new abilities for something good. And he feels the gold cross. Years later, when he's beaten to a pulp, and you have this juxtaposition of him, Karen Page, and it's that same woman. And it's this nun. And I read this, but it didn't end there for me, because then the other issue is, who is this woman? She begins to pray for him, a very moving prayer. And she says this, she's praying to God. I'll read the last part of it. She says, if I'm to be punished for my past sins, so be it. If I'm to be cast into hell, so be it. But spare him. So many need him. Hear my plea. Matt recognizes it's the same woman who visited him when he was a child, who he made a promise to. Her scent, her voice, and the cross. It's the same cross. And he asks this, "Are you my mother?" She says, "Oh, no, of course not." But her heart skipped a beat.
Ooh.
So when I read this, I said, "What?" And so I was quite moved by that book, by that story. And I still am moved by that story. And then when we meet Karen has sold him out for heroin. And she has searched him out, not knowing what she has, the implications of what she's done, the consequences of what she's done. And she wants to find Matt so that he can save her. Because the men are coming after her. The porn people she used to work for. They're coming after her. She's very rather selfish. She finally finds Matt. She finds him. And when he finally meets up with Matt, she says, he tells her, "I've lost nothing. I've lost nothing." Meaning, I'll show you something else. Look at this panel here. Meaning he just lost material things. He hasn't lost really things that matter. And he forgives her. He absolutely forgives her. And he's born again. He was born in Hell's Kitchen, and he was born again in Hell's Kitchen. Those are lines, those are not my lines, those are Frank Miller's lines. And the one of my favorite panels in the comic is the ending. And they're walking down together. Karen and Matt.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So, whenever I think about this book, I think about people that I've known and people that I've cared for, people that I just knew they do the right thing. Forgiveness is not easy to do. Doing things for the right reasons are not the reason. I saw you had Poke on Joe a while back, Gary, and Poke on said something I agreed with. There's good people and there's bad people. And Poke on said, well, maybe there's just people who do good things, and there's people, maybe more good things, and there's people who do more bad things, which is a very stoic view of things. And I tend to agree with him on this. And maybe at the end of one's life, we can assess and if we make the judgment if they were good, if we want to do that. Because being human is just very difficult, really. And but our capacity for good is phenomenal, as is our capacity for cruelty and indifference. But that's just the way it is. So,
nice.
Yeah. So that's
that reads kind of like a full circle read for it. And I mean, and you and I have discussed this before. It's a beautiful story.
Yeah, it is.
Very
moving. I mean, it really is. I mean,
I'm not talking about the Daredevil part. I'm talking about the part with your mom that it brings you back to that.
Yeah,
and her kindness and how it influenced you.
I always see that whenever.
But it feels the power of comics to bring that up in you too.
The thing is, yes. I mean, the thing is the power of these books, the Mazzucchelli artwork and the collaboration with Frank, and what they were able to do with this book is absolutely phenomenal. And again, that's why the comics, I think, are unequal with poetry, books, and novels. It's a beautiful medium, and some people I'll tell them, okay, it's so hard. Here's a pencil, it's a pen. Draw me a story. You can't do it. You can't.
Right.
Right.
This is not easy to do, and so. Stories, where would we be without them? I mean, frankly, in any medium.
Remember, the writers always talk about the hardest thing is the blank piece of paper, and trying to deal with that as both in the writing and with the art side.
Yeah,
that's true. So,
that was phenomenal, Gore. I always love when you talk about your mom.
So, well, oh my God, I went really long. I'm really sorry. I'm glad you guys bear.
No.
I'm not sorry.
This is really long. I'm for you guys. For mine, fine. But usually you guys use this for an hour.
Gore, when I invite you on my channel, I know we're going long.
Well, again,
This isn't about rushing something. This is about the time. This was fantastic.
well, still, I don't take it. I'm grateful. Thank you for indulging me, all of you. Thank you.
I'm on vacation. This is fun. What are you talking
I
about?
wanted to get everyone one for a while, so.
And I just learned a whole plethora of new avenues of books to look at, and some I will read, some I might be hesitant.
And one thing we all learned tonight is, damn, Strangers in Paradise is wild, and none of us knew.
No,
It is wild.
all I can think about is in 1985, you were reading way deeper than I was. I mean, I don't even think those were even at any of the comic book stores I was at. And if they were, they must have had them behind the counter.
See, I wasn't reading those comics because I didn't have access to them or knew about them.
Yeah.
But I was reading, when you were reading those, Gar, I was reading novels like crazy. Like I said, by that time, by 12, I had already read all the Sherlock Holmes stories.
That's amazing. Because that's not easy to read, Gary. That's pretty good.
But I mean, because I had access to novels, I didn't have access to those.
Yeah.
So that's where I found like my love of reading was through, because those were my escapist things.
No, and I mean, the Warren magazines were important to me. Again, I mentioned the Legion of Superheroes, Titans, X-Men, also important to me, and Legion. But that's why I was thinking about including them here. But these are the ones that I guess, just I don't know. I just decided to do it this way and mention these and how they basically had a much broader impact on how I saw things. And so when I moved to a major city for university and such, and was exposed to all kinds of things, I was already predisposed to be open to them in music and all type of things. But again, early on, I was already interested in stuff like this, but it was always the artwork would draw me in, and then the writing. And that would make me,
that's like for all of us that are here, I think that's one of the greatest things about the kind of culture that we all come from very different places.
Yeah.
But what we all have in common is an open mind to things.
Yeah.
And it draws us together.
Oh,
and I just got to plug this real quick. So, Doug, follow Gore's link in my description. Go check his channel out if you want more of what you saw tonight. Gore is a fantastic storyteller. He is a fantastic reader. You will love his videos. I strongly encourage you to go check his channel out. Gore, I don't even remember how I met you on YouTube. I just know you and I connected one time, and then we were friends since.
Conan. It was Conan.
Was it?
It was a Conan because I think I commented. It may have been the Frost Giant's daughter. One of the early videos that I saw of you, and I know you tense dislike for it, and I remember how much I liked it.
Not the Frost Giant's daughter, just that one version of
French
it.
one. Yeah, the French one. This one here. This is the one I liked to tease Gary.
That's Gary's favorite book.
And
yeah,
I mean, look at this incredible artwork. How can you say no to this? How can you say no? I'm trying to seduce the others.
Just because the artwork's good doesn't make the story good.
And so, that is incredible. You just can't beat that. Look at that. Can't beat that. So I think it's one of the first times. Yeah. So.
Yeah, but no, it's been a pleasure. I mean, yes, and we have Damien plugging me here too.
Hey, Damien. Happy New Year, Damien.
Paradiso.
Yeah, Damien was one of the
Not
first.
Paradiso.
Yeah, that's I have a book channel that I started last year discussing novels, and that's Libro Paradiso on that channel. I don't make too many videos on it, but I've done a few.
It's in the description. I don't have. Let's see if I can. I'll have to copy. Let me see.
So, Gore, do you also follow animation?
Not as much, no. I mean, it's limited. I like the medium, but I do not know.
I was just thinking, looking at your choices are really interesting, and it really seems like someone who they got introduced to animation through Ralph Bakshi, as opposed to Walt Disney. And when you talk about getting introduced with Epic and with heavy metal and stuff, it has that kind of same, not outsider necessarily, but sort of outlaw vibe to it,
Yeah, that's true about these, and certainly
there you go, guys. I just put it in the. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just put Gore's link in the chat as well.
That one and the films and And Gary, guys, when I was watching HBO, for example, that's how I saw Cat People.
I
Mhm.
love Cat People.
Yeah.
I saw
Natasha
Body.
Kinski had an effect on me when I was young too.
Yeah, Natasha was important because I saw her there in Cat People, and then when I saw Paris, Texas, and we have often talked about on my channel, the Wim Wenders film, which is those last 30 minutes of Paris, Texas, are some of the most moving things you will see in a movie.
Yeah.
Astonishing, absolutely astonishing. And again, it's one of those things where you're a good kid and your parents trust you, so. Again, you shouldn't be watching some of those movies, but I would watch them. I wanted to see, I was really angry. I was actually fuming when Blade Runner came out because I saw the previews and I said, "Don't be rated R. Don't be rated R."
Oh,
And also, who also had a big effect on me that nobody talks about back in that day too was Mariel Hemingway.
Oh, Mario. Yes, she was intense.
And man, I love that movie Creator with her and Peter O'Toole. Such an underrated movie.
What movie was that? Your favorite year?
85?
85, I think so. Okay.
Yeah, and Vincent Spano was in it too, and his wife Barbara was dying.
Mhm.
And Peter O'Toole's trying to help him out. And there's that moving scene with him, and he's crying at her bedside, and he's trying, and I get emotional just thinking about that scene. It's so good.
Good. Think about movies and comics. Another thing is, I think probably some of the people here, as you can remember this, is I'm the generation when you were like 7 years old, you can go to the movies by yourself.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, my dad would drop me off if it was an R movie. He'd just go buy me the ticket, hand it to me, and go have fun. I'll be back when you want me back.
Good Lord, y'all lived in different worlds from me.
Yeah.
I personally never got to go by myself. I just had to drag little bro
My
with
parents
me.
let me pretty much do what I wanted.
Yeah.
I wasn't because I didn't get in trouble. I wasn't a bad kid, so they didn't care.
Well, neither was
And
I
my
wasn't
father,
like in prison, but my parents were like uber strict. But if they said let's go to the movie, it was always going to be me and John together for sure. It wasn't going to be just me and my friend. You have to take your brother with you. So,
and my father loved film as a medium, and so I didn't have to beg him to take me to see Star Wars. I didn't have to beg him to take me to see Star Trek.
yeah.
I didn't have to beg him to take me to see Superman. Shoot, he was shoving right up there in the front of the line to see the new Superman movie, just like me. And so when we went and saw movies, we didn't get to see the rated R movies, but he took us to see all the Disney re-releases and everything else that came out. And
That's good.
it was incredible. And then we got VCRs, and
Yeah, we couldn't afford the VCR. I asked my mother many years later. Well, and I asked her, so I would go to the movies on Saturdays and Sundays, and you would just drop me off? And she goes, yes. Why? Because that's all you wanted to do all week. You talk. You want to go to the movies. You wouldn't leave us alone. So they would go shopping. They would go shopping, and I would just walk in. It was a PG film, no matter what it was. One of the earliest films that I saw, I think I told Gary, was the one with Sean Connery and Audrey Hepburn about the middle-aged Robin Hood, Robin and Marion.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I had no idea what that was. I just walk in, and I'm walking in, and so I'm watching this, right? So I would do that. Then I had a neighbor who I went to school with him, with his son, again, my Catholic school, and they would go to the drive-ins, and they would invite me to go with them. That's how I saw The Warriors on the drive-in theater. Alien.
That's where I first saw Conan.
Conan. Oh, really? The drive-in?
Yeah. And guess the movie, because it was always a double feature. Two movies that had nothing to do with each other. Conan was the feature, and I begged my parents for a month knowing it was coming out nonstop. There was no way they weren't taking me to it because they just wanted to shut me up. But
what was the other film?
Cheech and Chong Up in Smoke.
Oh my God.
Oh Lord.
So you received a whole different education with that one.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, Cheech and Chong was big in the 70s. I mean, for those of you who are younger here, if you've seen Bad News Bears, that's basically the childhood for many of us.
Yeah.
That's that type of environment. That's the world we lived in. I mean, and that's just the way it was. And so we would go off see all these type of movies and the odd double features, and But the thing is, I was always open to these things, and I always was. Some people were not, and I understand that. So I guess I would. So when it comes to these books, that's why there's so much variety.
Right. Well, and even and you know, and I was like you, I was always attracted to the adult stuff, and especially the stuff with like women in it, right? Because
Yeah.
I remember back in the day, like a big influence on me too was Sylvia Crystal movies.
Oh, the Emmanuel.
Oh, the Emmanuels, Mata Hari, and she Lady Chatterley's Love.
Yeah, I saw that on HBO. That was one of the films that was on HBO as a kid.
Lady Chatterley's Love. Yeah.
Never, because now D.H. Lawrence, when I started to read novels, I was 18 or 19, I began to read his novels, but not Lady Chatterley. I read his other novels like The Rainbow, Sons and Lovers.
Oh, and I just thought she was so elegant.
Yeah.
Like she was just, she was gorgeous.
So.
But yeah, fantastic show. Thank you so much, Gore.
Oh, no, thank you all. I really
not only thank you for all of you that joined me tonight.
Yeah, thank you all for being here.
Yeah, they're only here for you. They don't give a shit about me, Gore.
No,
yeah, I'm excited. When he
Gary,
told me,
you bring them in, Gary. You really do. And I'm really grateful that you're here. I think all of us are
I really showed up for you, and because Tim canceled on me. So
Cliff, it was nice seeing you pop in. I was really excited when you popped in. Thank you for joining us.
glad I could be here.
And also Chuck, you as well, because I always know I got my buddy Jim. To have you two guys jump in as well was just great, especially just so you guys can experience like what I get to experience when I talk to Gore, just like this breadth of experience and knowledge and just the true genuine love of medium and people. It's just, it's always fantastic, Gore. The quality of you as a person always comes through in your speech.
Well, that's kind of you, Gary. Thank you.
But thank you so much. We're going to say thank you to the audience. We're going to go around the horn real quick and let these guys tell us what's coming up for them. I did not mean to yawn on you. I've been up since early, but let's make everybody equal here for a minute. And Chuck, we'll start with you, sir, because you're the next one over from Gore. I know you're coming up on Joe's channel, correct?
Yes, I will be popping in for Joe's celebration show. So we will be in there for that. I know he's talked about a pickup tonight, and then we'll be talking about movies at the end of the month, which, as you know, are one of my favorite things to talk about. So, so that's what I've got going on YouTube right now. So, and maybe occasionally helping out Gary on a random Tuesday when my wife doesn't have things planned for me.
Yes, because like for the next 4 months, I'm short a co-host. Steve's teaching for 4 months on Tuesday.
Well, that's what he calls it. So, anyways,
right. Let him have his dreams. But also, before we get to Jim, I mean, we have the new year started, and we have to, of course, mention again that it was Cliff's birthday. So happy birthday once again to Cliff. And his birthday on the 5th. So happy birthday to our good buddy and friend, Anachronic Comics, Joe. Tune into his birthday stream tomorrow night. Don't just tune in because he gives stuff away. Tune in because Joe has an awesome channel, and he always gives a lot of history with his content. If you haven't checked out Joe's content, then you're missing out as well. Jim, what's coming up for you, sir?
Tomorrow, I will be dropping my 10 book wish list for 2025 video. It's not very long. It's pretty short. It's a mix of books. People will be surprised. I'm going a little wacky this year.
I think I'm going to do a list of 5, but it won't be a surprise. I'm just chasing some not super expensive keys, but just things that I like. Just silly things that interest me.
I mean, this is a wish list, people. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, all of it, but, it's there.
Cliff, what's coming up for you in the Council of Comics and just you, sir?
Oh, my goodness. You've opened up so much. So I'm actually, because it's my birthday week, and my birthday month, I took off time. So and I want to try and beat my record for my most appearances in January from last year. So let's see what my success rate is. So I'll probably make a surprise appearance tomorrow morning on Legion's channel because I haven't been there in months. on a Friday because I've been working. So that should be fun. I don't know if I hopefully Joe will invite me for the evening. I'm going to check my DMs and see if I have the invite for his birthday because, I love my fellow Capricorns. On Saturday morning, I'll be on Brian's channel for his new Saturday morning show at 10 a.m. and I'll be his guest at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday. I'll be on Only Slabs as the first guest of the new year. At 8 p.m., I'll be on that channel whose name I keep forgetting, and it's really embarrassing. Nerdy something.
The Nerdy Collection? Or the
No. One that you guys don't regularly talk about.
It might not be one I've been familiar with.
No, it's one none of you are familiar with. The fact that I cannot remember the name is but I'll tell you this. Brandon from Mont Comics has been there. It's Nerdsy something podcast, but Brandon from Mont Comics has been there. Mike from Lunch Money's Comics has been on there. And now I will be there, and all sorts of other interesting people. And I keep forgetting the freaking name of this thing, and it's driving me nuts. But that'll be for 8 p.m. Sunday, we've got the Council of Comics. We're doing the third Die Hard movie for movie night at 5 p.m. At 9 p.m., I'll be on Black Crown Comics on Sunday. That'll be delightful. Tuesday and Monday night, 8 p.m., Council of Comics, New Keys and Hot Comics. And a whole new month for a whole new giveaway, for whole new prizes. Of course, Las Cruces won our big 1K giveaway with over $1,000 in prizes. I shipped my portion of it today. That man's going to be inundated with
that. Las Cruces has got to have millions of dollars in YouTube wins.
Yeah, I ain't lying. I'm convinced that he probably owns some type of stake in the StreamYard wheel or whatever the hell you guys use.
I just think it's because he's constantly everywhere. I just feel like the algorithm.
He is.
And if Mark doesn't cancel on us next Thursday, you're also on my channel again next Thursday.
Well, I was getting there because Tuesday night I'm on with Paul and the 619, and then Wednesday night we've got more of me and the Council of Comics for New Comic Book Day, and then after that Thursday night it's you, me, and DJ Links here with Gary B. And right, Legion of Comics, and
Okay.
And then there's other stuff, and then it'll be my turn for a Saturday morning for Comics and Coffee, and we'll see how that goes. And then the following Wednesday for the first Guess That Key of the year, I am one of the first two guests, so that's great. And that's it. I'm stoked. I'm really trying to rack in. these appearances.
So basically, you guys aren't going to see Cliff anywhere in the next couple months. Don't worry.
He's going to be a dope.
It's going to be painful. It's
coming up for me next week, and I think it's still on. We have David from Callie and Jordan Squad coming on for a card 1011, which will be fun. And then we have DJ Links, like we said, and Mark, Legion of Comics, Thursday for a movie again that Cliff sent them a list. So it's going to be like the John and Chuck show, except with DJ and Mark, and that should be a lot of fun. And you'll have me and Jim and Cliff there as well. And got some other stuff coming up. On February 1st, I have an interview. Me and Torsten are interviewing Jeff Isherwood. And he just completed his new 2-arc story in the Savage Sword of Conan. And you know him from doing Conan in the 90s and in the late 80s. So Jeff Isherwood, current Conan artist, is going to come on the show and talk things, all things barbaric. Maybe give us a hint at things that are coming up for him over at Titan Comics with the Conan IP. And Gore, that leaves you, sir. What's coming up for you?
I have homework. So you have a lot of homework.
Exactly. Just turn on YouTube. Cliff will be.
This is Gary's fault.
Yep.
See this homework here?
Oh my God.
I was watching Gary with Torsten, and they were talking Conan, obviously, right?
Ooh.
Right. So they were talking the Busiak years. So I went to my comic shop, and they had basically the whole run. So
I'm so jealous.
I got all these for a steal. I mean, really, really cheap. So I have a lot of reading to do.
And some
But I'm
great
looking-
covers on those too, right?
Absolutely. I mean, they're just stunning. I mean, you just can't beat some of this stuff. And no, I'm really looking forward to these because I trust him and I trust Thurston. They know their Conan. And I highly recommended these. It's like over 50 issues that I have here. Well, this is not, there's more over there. And then finally in the mail today, it took 3 months to get here from Australia. That's the way it works. Is I got my Phantom comics. Again, it was tough to choose top 10.
Cool.
Phantom is one of them. And these are the Phantom comics.
Yes.
Wow.
Scandinavian translations into English.
Ooh, look at what covers, what art. Holy
Yeah.
cow.
Oh wow.
These are, I'm a big Phantom guy. When I was
And that
a
movie's a
kid-
guilty pleasure of mine.
Yeah, I think it's a good film. And, the Phantom is still being produced in Scandinavia, in Brazil, in India, in Australia. But in the place that it was born, here in the U.S., there's no Phantom comics. Very frustrating. This one is Nat Turner. I mean, and this is it, this cover. Look at that. Can't beat that.
Wow,
That's
that looks like a movie poster.
Yeah.
Amazing.
No, the Phantom is a great character by Lee Falk, and
If only they would do something with him and also Doc Savage.
Yeah,
Just another property that's rotting for no reason.
they have many of the Doc Savage novels. Those little, is it the Valentine books?
Yeah.
And, so I think I have all of them. I think, but the Phantom is just a remarkable character. Absolutely. So I have a lot of homework to do. Maybe I'll make a video. I'm not so sure. I make videos when I get the idea to make a video. I made one a couple of weeks ago about work by Luis Garcia, an artist I discovered in heavy metal, also in the 80s. A book that he did called Nova Dos. If you're interested, guys, in watching it, it's my latest video. But that's about it until something else happens. But a lot of homework and art, thanks to Gary and Thurston. Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you all so much.
Oh, thank you.
What
Thank
an
you very much.
awesome night. This is exactly what my week needed. A great night talking to great people, hanging out, and an awesome audience. So thank you all so much. You all know how I like to end this thing. We're gonna say keep it casual, and we're gonna play this out. Oh, I gotta bring up the new one, but I don't have it yet. Keep it casual, guys.
Bye, everybody. Happy New Year.